Let's talk about sales objections. Every consultant's favorite topic. What I find, and I don't know that this is unique to consultants, but I have a hunch that it is because they're a peculiar bunch. Consultants seem to think that objections are deal breakers. Somebody objects, well, they're not going to buy. Getting these objections, well, there's no market here. I'm hearing these things, no opportunity. And it's almost like I find this among our client group that some people are trying to look for or develop the objection-free offer.
Yes.
The perfect offer for which there are no objections, nobody will raise any concerns, and it's just a perfect fit for their market, and everybody buys it without hesitation. And perhaps I might be the first one to tell you this, dear listener, there's no such thing as a perfect offer. And even the best offer in the world will come with its fair share of objections.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, the other thing that I see really often is the consultant really taking on all the responsibility for the objection. They make it something about them, right? Well, clearly my offer wasn't good enough. Clearly I didn't present it well enough. Clearly I didn't, A, B, C, whatever it might be. And in some cases, of course, you, again, didn't do it in the perfect way. But there is a challenge, I think, often in understanding that the objection very regularly occurs internally within your prospect, right? It's something entirely different that's going on that has not much to do with the offer that you've presented or even how you presented it in some cases.
Yeah, and we'll get into the types of objections today, and it'll become really clear which ones are about you or your process or something you're putting forward, and which ones are about them and their own particulars and deliberations and challenges and constraints. So I want to get there. I want to get into the three different types of objections and how to handle them. But before we get there, I want to talk about addressing objections versus preempting objections. And maybe just a word on why, in your estimation, Karie, is it more powerful, more valuable, more effective to preempt objections than to address them head on when they're brought up?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is that both skills are necessary, right? Both skills are important. That being said, if you deeply know the folks in your market, right? If you really understand where they're coming from and what their challenges are and what battles they're fighting out there in the world, being able to be preemptive, being able to address objectives, although I don't even know if I'd even frame it that way, right? What you're really doing is giving the information that will take some of the steam out of the upcoming objection. It also really shows that you understand, right? That you know your stuff, that you've been listening, that you're paying attention. And what it serves to do is exactly that, right? Reduce the power, reduce the feeling, reduce the intensity of the objection when it actually comes up. And that allows, a much richer, deeper conversation.
Yeah, I think there's something neurological to discuss here too, which I won't be able to do, so we're not going to have that discussion. But in layman's terms, and we've all experienced this, right? When you ask somebody a question in a challenging way, and they answer it, there's a certain level of skepticism when it comes to their answer, right? Because you're challenging, you're asking the question, and they're going to try to, obviously in this context, answer it effectively and overcome the objection. So your skepticism meter, right, or monitor is on high alert, right? Yeah. Does that are they just saying that? Are they just trying to win the deal? Are they just trying to get past this objection and brush it under the rug so they can make some money, right? So you're going to be highly skeptical of the answer a provider, a seller, a consultant gives you to an objection or a question that you ask directly. You're less skeptical when they offer some insight or an opinion or a feature or a strategy or a take on the same matter without you having directly asked it. There's something about the power of suggestion there. When you're not asking the question, you might not have even thought of the objection yet, and they're preemptively addressing it. You're much more likely to take that information in and take it seriously.
The other thing I want to do is bristle a bit at this notion of like objection and overcoming the objection. I think what that does is the way we talk about it often, the way it's spoken about in sales, often creates this notion of a very adversarial conversation. And that's also a terrible place to be, right? If you're being peppered with objections and you're just sort of fighting back, right? Trying to negate them all, you're in this stance of pushing back against each other, when really what you want to do as a consultant, really what you are doing as a consultant, is getting on the same side of a big problem with your prospect, with your client, and helping them understand how you can work with them to solve it. And so I also believe that it's important to reframe how you enter that kind of conversation, because if you are walking into it with a win-lose attitude, right? If you're walking into it saying, well, I need to like beat down all of their concerns so that I can win this business, that's putting you in a terrible position, A, for the conversation, and B, for the ongoing relationship and the engagement that you're going to have with the client. And so it's really important as you pick up the phone or get onto Zoom or whatever it is that you're doing, to put yourself in a place of exactly that, right? Being on the same side as the client and helping them to understand how you are going to support them, which is very different than, I don't want to besmirch the used car salesman in the world, but this vision
They're
we
people
have,
too, Karie.
I know they are, and important people, but this smarmy salesperson that we all have in our minds, who is just there to tap dance their way around our concerns and issues. You really want to help this person resolve their concerns in an honest way so that they can move forward with confidence with you. And that means not coming into this as if it's a boxing match.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the conversation you and I had yesterday, Karie. We sat down and we had a meal, and I wanted to share with you some of what I'm thinking about doing in the next quarter, and some of the ideas that I have and the strategies I want to pursue. And we had a good chat about, I think, where the company is going. And what did it feel like? It felt like we're on the same side of the table. Well, we are, right? But there were objections. There are objections. You ask questions. Well, what about this? And have you thought about that? And why do you want to do it this way? And what if this happens? What were those? Those were objections. But there were objections that were presented from the same side of the table when we have a shared agenda and a shared goal on what we want to achieve. And so therefore they were worked through collaboratively and proactively. And I said, well, that's a good point. Maybe we should think about it this way. And we figured it out, right? Which is kind of obviously how things hopefully work in an internal team dynamic. And I think you're absolutely right. That's a much better frame of reference than the adversarial, I want something from you. So you put forth an objection and I'm going to smash it. And then and then I'm right and you're wrong. And then until the next objection, right? And that's, I think, to your point, a very unhealthy way to view the dynamic. And I think to add to that, you want to, whether it's preemptively or not, you want to truly address the objection at its core. Grab it from the roots. That is, move beyond the superficial, which we'll get into a little bit more, I think, today, and really try to understand where the objection is coming from. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be your client. So if that objection is not addressed effectively, or it's addressed superficially, or you try to get past it to win the deal, that will come back to haunt you eventually. And it'll be your problem. It'll be a bigger problem at that stage.
Yeah, and it'll come back to haunt you either because they don't really have confidence, they really haven't gotten past it. Or to your point about our conversation, what it means is you haven't taken the objection or the information they're giving you. I'm going to call it that for a moment, right? The information they're giving you, you haven't taken it seriously and you haven't used it to improve how you're going to work with that client. And that's what an objection is. Let's be clear, right? An objection is information. It's information about either the specifics of the client's scenario or how they feel or, where they are in this moment, or in some cases, how well or how clear you've been about explaining what it is you're going to do. And again, sort of in this ongoing mission, apparently I'm on today, to diffuse the notion of an objection. Thinking about it as information, as data, exceptionally helpful, right? Exceptionally helpful in helping you understand where to go next with the conversation, exceptionally helpful in you deciding if this is even a client you should work with, and exceptionally helpful in ensuring that you can make sure that they've truly moved beyond, so that when you start working together from a solid stance.
It entirely comes back to the whole question of what's the point of the sales conversation. What are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to close a deal? Well, you can close lots of deals with the wrong people. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that that's much of an accomplishment. Or are we trying to ensure fit? Are we trying to make sure that this is going to be a good relationship? This is going to be a good engagement for both parties. We're both going to do what's expected of us. We're both aligned. We're both bought in. And we both have a shared sense of what we're trying to accomplish. We both agree on how it's going to work. And only when all those boxes are checked do we engage, right? And I think the objection handling mindset, to your point, is less about, is this a fit? And can we work together? And it's more about, let's close the deal, which is a problematic mindset to begin with.
Yeah, agreed.
I want to talk about preempting objections a little bit before we get into the 3 types of objections. And I just want to, this is a nod to discovery, right? 80% of a client's objections can be resolved before they ever come up. They can be preempted before they are ever addressed, right? In that they can be addressed before they're even materialized or understood or verbalized by the client. How? Through effective discovery conversations. Mm-hmm. Your job in the discovery conversation, and I was talking to a client this morning who said, well, my discovery call, I think one of the problems is I have 46 slides on our process. What? Hold on, what? That's not a discovery call. A discovery call is entirely about them. Mm-hmm. The client, their problem, their need, their challenges, their plight, what they've done, what they've tried, how that's worked, how that hasn't worked, how they're feeling about that, what they're looking to do next, what they believe will be required to be successful, what specific outcomes they're looking for, what results they want, in what time frame, what they believe the most effective strategies are going to be to pursue those outcomes, and so on and so forth. When you do this right, there are no objections in discovery. Because what is discovery ultimately? Discovery is an uncovering of the truth, both in terms of what are the problems, what are we struggling with, what's the challenge, what have we tried, all those things, and in terms of what do we want? What do we want to accomplish? What goals do we want to achieve? What results do we want to get? There's no objections there. No objections will come up in the what do I want conversation. No objections will come up in the what am I trying to achieve conversation. And from your perspective, if you do this right, obviously you have training on these things, so I'm not suggesting it's straightforward. You have to get trained on this properly. But if you do this right, you should have all the information you need to anticipate and therefore preempt objections before they come up. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Want to talk about some types of objections?
Invariably, objections come up.
Yes.
Right. And so let's break down the 3 most common type of objections, and these are categories, and they're going to come across in different ways in different languages, etc. But these are the 3 most common types of objections. Starting with, first and foremost, process objections. So when you think about discovery, one of the things that comes out of discovery hopefully, is clarity on what the client wants, kind of their current state, where they are right now, and their desired state, where they want to be. And what you have hopefully prescribed is a process to get them from where they are to where they want to be, what we call in the 90-day pipeline a results mechanism. You can call it whatever you want, service offering, offer, methodologies, whatever, doesn't matter. But it's a process to get them from where they are to where they want to be. And the first category of objection is, do I believe this process is going to work? Do I believe this is going to get me to where I want to be? Do I believe that this is the right way, the right vehicle to get me to my destination? This is where typically the more material objections lie. This is where, among the objections that do get raised, the real, how do I say this, substantial objections, the ones that actually have the ability to kill the deal, the ones that actually determine whether the deal goes forward or not, typically live here, right? Because if the prospect is not fully bought into your process, they're not fully bought into the vehicle that you're going to take them in, they're not fully bought into the steps you're going to take them through to get to the destination, why would they work with you? Now, often it doesn't come up as an objection at this stage. It comes up as, it kind of feels like a lack of fit. There's a lack of buy-in. There's a lack of belief in a word that often comes up as a different type of objection we'll talk about later: money, timing, etc.
Yeah. And a lot of people will gravitate to these process objections because they're tangible, right? It's a lot easier to ask you the question, how will this work? And to kind of poke at that than to say, you know what, I don't really buy that you're good at this, right? I don't really believe it. And so what you may find is this prospect kind of pulling you into the minutia of how you're going to move forward. And there's it's important to be able to refocus them on what it is that they want, where it is that they're going, and the higher level version of what it is that you're going to be able to do for them.
But it almost feels like you're dissuading people from getting into the minutia. Is that what you're saying?
I am saying that to some degree. I think you've got to really pay attention to your prospect and understand what it is that they need. But if somebody is taking you down a path where they want to understand every single detail of every single step, you're going to get both of you are going to get yourselves into trouble, right? Because all of that is context based. It all depends on the steps that came before it. You are going to utilize your particular results mechanism, as we call it, right? Your particular process, your particular style to navigate through their problem. And if you let the conversation become too hyperfixated on the details, you risk very quickly losing the big picture, which is, yes, we can get from A to B, and we can do it effectively, and we can resolve your problem.
Yeah, and potentially missing the point entirely. So a couple things on this. One is, I think it's worth acknowledging that there are different types of buyers who will have different processes and different ways of making decisions and different ways of processing information. And some of them are more detail oriented and are going to want to get, more into the weeds than others. Mm-hmm. Some people are a little bit higher level and are able to grasp the big picture very effectively without getting into the weeds. So I think acknowledging that there's some variability here from client to client, buyer to buyer, not everyone buys the same. And at the same time, when you're getting questions that are kind of going into the details, obviously, use your judgment in terms of when it makes sense to go there, when it doesn't, but also seek to understand why that matters to them.
Yeah.
Like, the details are the details, and maybe it makes sense to go there, maybe it doesn't, but why is that important? Have they been through something else, another process, where some of those details were material and they didn't like them? Did they have a bad experience? Are they trying to avoid repeating the same mistake again? That's more important to address than the particular details. Or rather, that context is is valuable to understand in order to address the objection and get into the details. So that's the first, process objections. Process objections are about, do I believe this process, this methodology that's being prescribed is going to get me to the destination that I want to get me to my end result? And it should be kind of like a yes, no. Yes, I believe it. No, I'm not sure for these reasons. And you want to make sure you resolve any doubt here. You want to make sure that there is a sufficient amount of belief. You've maximized the belief the prospect has in the process that's being prescribed. The second category is what I would call belief objections, but belief in something else entirely. That is belief in you and belief in me. So now, let's say the process is fine. We believe in them. Yes, you've got the right process. Good process. Solid process. Okay? But why you and why us? How do we know that you can deliver on this? How do we know that we can deliver on this? How do we know that we're capable of partnering with you on something like this?
That's a really important piece that I'm going to highlight for a moment, because again, if we go back to what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, many consultants are trying to push what they can do, right? This is what I can do. This is what I can do. This is what I can do, without sometimes even noticing that the real concern the prospect has is whether they can participate or provide what needs to be provided or do what needs to be done. That can take a bunch of different forms. And so it's really important to recognize that both of those beliefs have to be in place, right? I need to believe that you can do it, consultant, and I need to believe that I can do it. Without both of those in place, yes, I'm going to have a great fear that this will not go well.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the biggest objection that we deal with in terms of our business. And maybe this is an extreme and not the most relatable, but as an example, we've graduated over 1,000 consultants through 90-day pipeline. We've got hundreds of published case studies and testimonials and results. We don't get people coming in questioning us or our process because we've largely demonstrated. I mean, certainly in the beginning we did, absolutely, right? But at this stage, the track record's pretty self-explanatory. We do get people coming in questioning themselves. Can I do this? Am I capable of this? Is this for me? Will this work for me given my very particular circumstances and conditions and market and offer and price point and hair color, etc. Right? And to your point, if your response to every objection is to assert your credibility, well, you're missing the point half the time, right? Because it's and I would argue at this stage, if you've prescribed a good process and it makes sense and you've discussed it intelligently, they're likely not the most skeptical of you of this, especially if your positioning and your marketing is effective and dialed in. They're probably not super skeptical of you. They probably see you as the expert at this stage, but question whether they can deliver. And not just them, because often it's a team effort. It might not be the individual you're speaking to that's concerned about themselves, maybe their team or the bandwidth that they have to deliver on this, and whether they can meet the expectations that you have of their involvement.
Yeah, and this is a place where overcoming an objection, is again, maybe not the right way to think about it, because yes, you can tell them, yeah, you'll be fine. You'll be able to do what you need to do. But if they truly have a concern about their ability to participate, that is something that they need to overcome. You need to help them, certainly. But if they can't, then this is also probably not a great engagement for you to be involved in. You need that as much as they do.
Yeah, you almost want to think of it as when the client engages with you, you want their commitment to the process to be very high. You want them to come in with maximal commitment to the process and doing the work and executing. And so if there's questions around, well, can we execute on this? Do we have the bandwidth? Do we have the resources? Do we have the people? Can we fulfill on this? You want to give that some room to breathe, right? Because if you just squash it and go, oh, don't worry, if you can't deliver, we'll pick up the slack. Terrible answer. Don't ever say that, right? Well, let's say you did. You might, in the short term, get them to be able to sign on the dotted line, but then will they actually show up? Will they do the work? Will they give you what you need? Will they collaborate? Will your 3-month project turn into a 12-month project and your fees don't go up, by the way?
Yeah.
Right. So think of it as you want to maximize their commitment, their buy-in to the process by the time they sign with you. And if you need to resolve the question of belief, can we do it? Do we have what it takes? Do we have the resources, et cetera? Spend the time there, because you'll benefit from that discussion when the rubber hits the road and the project starts.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about the third type of objection. And this one is interesting because this is the one that often just stops the conversation from the consultant's perspective. And that is the objection of money, right? We can't afford it. And what's interesting is the other objections were often interested and willing to walk down a path of discussing them and trying to figure it out. As soon as someone comes up with, I don't have the money, it's almost like there's a bit of relief there. Whew, well, it's not about me. It's not about the offer. It's just about money. Therefore, guess there's nothing I can do about it. And off we go, right?
Yeah.
Not true.
So much to unpack there, right? So,
yes.
We have consultants that come into our program who are trying to validate a new offer. And our message to them is nothing is validated until money changes hands. Nothing is validated. No opinion truly matters until money changes hands. Because what happens is people say, well, I think what you're doing is really interesting. Well, I think there's a need for that. That's great. And I'm not saying that that's completely invaluable. What I am saying is you can't truly have confidence in an offer's viability in the market until people pay for it. Until, a more than one person ideally pays for it, right? Although one is a pretty good start, right? Especially considering deal sizes, and most of our clients are fairly low volume businesses, right? So money has to change hands. And until money changes hands, nothing really material has happened yet. So if the client's saying, well, I believe it, it's great, and I love it, and we want it, but boy, we don't have the money. Mm-hmm. I question how much they actually believe it. Because remember, it's not your goal that's being achieved here. It's their goal, it's their outcome, it's their results. So if they say they want to achieve the results, and they say they believe in your process, why can't they come up with the money?
Well, and if you've done a good job in discovery, you've also sized the problem, right? And you understand that the investment they're going to make in solving it is well worth it for the whatever result is going to be, right? Certainly, if you're selling someone a $100,000 solution to a $6,000 problem, that's, it's nonsensical. That's not where you are. If you've done your discovery, you already know that it is, in quotes, worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the other thing to understand here is that when you're selling B2B, nobody's spending their own money. Mm-hmm. I love it when people say, well, clients are cheap. Really? No, I don't think anyone's cheap with other people's money. Unless you're targeting really small businesses, then that's different, where the owner operator is taking out of their profits or whatever it may be. Sure, fine. But most of our clients are not targeting small businesses. Mm-hmm. They're targeting on the small end, mid-market companies, and on the large end, enterprises of all levels, where there are budgets, right? And sure, the money comes out of that budget, but not anyone individual's pocket. Mm-hmm. And so there's always ways to find money. There's always ways to move money around, either within internal departmental budgets or by seeking approval for more funds. And that often is the objection is, well, I can't get approval for more funds. Why not? Because I can't take this to my boss. Why not? Because something.
Yes.
And that's usually where, well, I'm shy and I'm embarrassed and this is my job and they're not going to believe, whatever, right? That's it's not money. It's, I don't have the confidence to take this to my boss for some other reason. That's your objection.
So I think what everyone wants to know is, how do you handle the money objection?
like any other objection, it comes down to understanding what's the objection behind the objection.
Exactly.
And if you do everything right, by the way, good discovery, preempt other objections, address process objections, address belief objections, 9 times out of 10, money objections don't come up.
Mhm.
You've preempted them. You've addressed them before they can even materialize. And then when they do come up, that's really your signal that you missed something earlier. And now the job becomes, well, what did I miss? What's the real concern behind this objection, so I can see what part of the process or what other objection went unaddressed. Is it a process thing? Is it a belief thing? So on and so forth.